Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Recha Kodash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 20th chapter. And as you can see, it says here, prophecy about Egypt and Ethiopia. And pretty much when you go into this, it's fairly short, but, it's concerning when the Assyrians came against, in particular here, Ashdod, as it says in the first verse, and eventually their campaigns in that region, which would affect Egypt, as it says, as it is prophesied here. So this is Isaiah chapter 20, verse 1. It says, in the year that Tartan came to Ashdod, when Sargon, the king of Assyria, sent him and fought against Ashdod and took it. So this is giving you a record of around what time this happened. Now, when you look this up, first off, Tartan was, I believe, one of the, like a general or a captain of Sargon's army, right? Let's see here. And it goes to show you the historical accuracy of the scriptures. Right, it says a title used by the Assyrian military. So it's one of his generals, field marshals, or commanders. And Sargon II, which indeed is, he was an Assyrian king at that time. Now, if I remember correctly, I think for a period of time, a lot of people tried to basically disprove the scriptures because in secular history, right, there wasn't any findings of Sargon II. And it wasn't until later on, I forgot what year it was, that some archaeologists ended up finding some records about him because he didn't rule from the main palace. So there weren't any records or much records of him there. And hence, for a period of time, people were like, oh, the Bible is just, see, this is another example of its inaccuracies. But it wasn't until they actually found those archaeological findings that a lot of people close their mouths concerning that. So anyway, I looked this up here, right? Assyrians capture Ashdod. And just briefly looking at the AI overview, it says here in the late 8th century BCE. Now, keep in mind, right, that when you're dealing with BC or BCE, as time moves forward, it counts down. So when they say the early 8th century, we're talking about closer to the 900s BC, right? 850 something, 880 something, 890 something. But when we talk about the late 8th century, that means it's almost over. So that's where you get your I hope I didn't butcher that, but you get your 7, as it says here, 7, 11, and so on. So yeah, maybe I did mess up the numbers there for a second. 8th century is the 700s. Let me put it that way. Okay, so when you see 8th century, is the 700s. Because anything past 700 is going into the 8th century, right? And same thing, when it talks about the 9th century, it's talking about the 800s. Okay, so the late 8th century is almost at the end of the 8th century, which is from, let's say, 750 counting down, 740, 730, 720. Here we are at 711, right? So the latter years of the 8th century. In any case, the Assyrian king Sargon II captured the Philistine city of Ashdod. This event is documented in both Assyrian inscriptions and the Bible, specifically Isaiah 20 and 1. So why don't people go when they go on their campaign to disprove the scriptures and claim how it's made up and it was written by man? Why don't they go ahead and disprove those inscriptions as well that back up the records that are in the scriptures? So it says here, Assyrian inscriptions and the Bible, specifically Isaiah 20 and 1, which we just read. The capture was a response to a Philistine revolt led by a king named Yamani, and it resulted in the destruction of the city. So let's take a quick look. Sargon II was a powerful Assyrian ruler who controlled a vast territory, including Egypt in the Middle East. Now, I believe he was the one that finished the siege. Right, when you read into the secular history, they have it as Shalmaneser V, who started the siege of Samaria, and then it was finished by Sargon. So continuing that reign which it is mentioned that Sargon was a brother of Shalmaneser V. There are different differing views on that, but I believe that's the general consensus. So during his reign, this is what happens, right? As it says here, he controlled a vast territory, including Egypt and the Middle East. Ashdod, one of the 5 main Philistine cities, attempted to break away from Assyrian rule. They were led by a king named Yamani. And what they did was they tried to make alliances, right, with, I think it says it here, the prophet Isaiah mentions the Assyrian capture of Ashdod in a prophecy against Egypt and Ethiopia. He uses the event as a warning to those who might seek alliances with these nations against Assyria, and even going for Israel as well, right? Basically, don't fall for that trap. It says here, archaeological excavations at Tel Ashdod have revealed destruction layers that align with the period of Assyrian conquest. So going back to Isaiah 20:1, you can read in more detail about that if you want. At the same time spake the Lord Yahweh. So around this time, the Lord spake by Isaiah the son of Amos, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins, and put off thy shoe from thy foot. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. Now, let's look into this word naked here, because Isaiah wasn't walking with his parts out, so to speak. It says here, naked, bare, right, nude, either partially or totally. Now, in the ancient world, when you wore your garment over, whether it was sackcloth or whatnot, you still had your loins covered, okay? So being naked didn't mean that you had, you were completely, fully unclothed. So here's an example, right? It says naked. This is the one in Job. And for Isaiah 20, let's just find the account of that. Right, it says here, B, used of one having taken off his mantle, goes only clad in his tunic. And this is 1 Samuel 19:24 and Isaiah 20:2, which is the precept we just read. So it doesn't mean Isaiah was walking around with no clothes on. All right. But what it means is that his outer layer of his attire was off. Similar to how Peter, right, when the scriptures talk about Peter was naked. See if I can find that real quick. It didn't mean that he was actually without clothes. Let me see here. Yeah, it's John 21:7. It says here, and he said unto them, cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Therefore that disciple whom Yahushua loved saith unto Peter, it is the Lord. This is when they realized that it was Yahushua. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat onto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. So Peter was not fishing without any clothes on. All right, but as it says, naked, meaning he didn't have that coat or that outer layer on. So it'd either be like an undergarb, like the shirt, and whatever to cover your loins, but it doesn't mean that they were without clothes. Similar is the case here with Isaiah. But the Lord had Isaiah do this as a symbol, right? And it's going to go into in verse 3. And the Lord said, like as my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia. So by Isaiah doing this, it would symbolize a condition or a state that Egypt and Ethiopia would be in. Similar to the things that the Lord had Ezekiel do as a sign. The Lord had Hosea do as a sign. Even Jeremiah, right? Verse 4 says, so shall the king of Assyria lead away the Egyptians prisoners and the Ethiopians captives, young and old, naked and barefoot, even with their buttocks uncovered, to the shame of Egypt. So obviously the Lord didn't have Isaiah uncovered to that point, but it was to symbolize how the Egyptians and the Ethiopians would be taken captive, pretty much as it says here, naked, right? Completely bare, so to speak. Verse 5, and you can look at an example of even in more recent times, the transatlantic slave trade. You'll see how they were shackled up, most of them were naked, It says here, and they shall be afraid and ashamed of Ethiopia their expectation, and of Egypt their glory. See, because at this point in time, it was a thing, right? Even Ashdod, which tried to make alliances with Egypt and Judah to rebel, because that's what they did. They stopped paying tribute to the Assyrians, and that led Sargon to come and do, well, send his general to come and do what he did. And similarly, this conspiracy was something that was common with Israel and Egypt. And that's why Isaiah warns, I believe in the 30th chapter, about going down to Egypt for help, is they would often try to come up with plans and ways to rebel against that superpower at the time. And they would be warned that it wouldn't end well for them. Sometimes they would listen, sometimes they would not. But this was an example here. Verse 6, and the inhabitants of this isle shall say in that day, behold, such is our expectation. See, so these were the ones we were looking to them to basically, help us, whither we flee for help to be delivered from the king of Assyria, and how shall we escape? So we're pretty much cooked, right? The people we look to be our help, to help us out so we can join together against the Assyrians, they just got sent captive and conquered. So what are we going to do at this point? Right? And that's pretty much the message that's being said over here. And then overall, it's basically to say, don't put your trust in Egypt. Don't put your trust in neighboring nations. Trust in the Lord. Okay? So with that, Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Rakha Kodash. And until next time, Shalom.